crafty friends, and welcome. Today I am sharing an interactive card I created last weekend at the Altenew 24-hour retreat. This retreat was to celebrate World Card Making Day. So this is an interactive card using Altenew's Craft a Flower Rose Layering die set, and I have chosen to make roses in a rainbow colour way. As you can see, this card spins. It looks difficult, but it's actually really easy, and I'm going to show you how. The overall diameter is 7 inches, so you'd need to make a card, an envelope to hold the card. I'm starting off with a piece of cardstock measuring 4 inches by 8 inches, and along the 8-inch side I have scored at 4 inches, folded that over and burnished it with my Teflon bone folder. Now, to make the V or tent shape base, I've put the folded edge along the top of my scoring board, and I'm measuring with a pencil 2 marks at 1 1/4 and 2 3/4. I'm then going to cut away from the notch, from the right hand mark to the right hand bottom corner of the card, cutting away that V, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side, lining it up with the pencil mark and the left bottom corner. To enhance the base, I thought it would look nice to make it look like it was in a basket, like a basket of flowers. So I have used the Woven Basket 3D embossing folder, and we're going to go ahead in a moment and emboss that. But while I had my scoring board out, I cut a piece of cardstock to 2 inches by 2 3/4, and on the 2-inch side I scored at 1 inch, and I scored on the left at a quarter inch and 2 1/2. So you've got a quarter inch score line on each side. That will become our stabilizer for the card. So as you can see here, I've put the front part of the base into my embossing folder and run that through my die cutting machine. And now I'm going ahead with some colouring to enhance the texture that the embossing folder gives. I started off by using a blending brush, but I felt that I wanted a darker image, so I'm actually taking my ink cube directly to the paper. I've used Rocky Shores, but you could use any ink, any sort of brown ink color if you were using this embossing folder. Not essential, you could use any embossing folder you have in your stash. So I'm happy with that. Now we want to go on to make the wheel part that will turn. I've taken some thick, sturdy acetate, and I'm wanting a diameter of about 5.5 inches. And funnily enough, my extra sticky double-sided tape from Altenew was more or less the exact size. So I used that as a template just to draw around with a Sharpie. I then cut that out. I found the middle, and now I'm adding 1 brad or split pin. Using my pokey tool, I'll make a hole in that, and that's where the brad will go through the thick acetate. Now you want a thick acetate so it's sturdy and will hold up to all the flowers that we're going to add. Then I will attach that to the card base about 3/4 of an inch from the fold, more or less, and I will then use my pokey tool again. I want to make sure that that curve doesn't go below, maybe leaving 3/4 to an inch gap between the bottom of the card base and the bottom of the acetate circle. So here I'm popping in the brad, and then I'll open on the other side, I'll open the 2 metal tabs, and that will secure our acetate circle to our card base. So once I was happy with that, now was the fun part to try and create some roses. Let's quickly get back to this tab that I added. I'm using some strong double-sided tape, or you could use some liquid glue on those little quarter-inch tabs, and I'm placing that inside along the bottom, more or less in the middle. I'm just eyeballing that, and I'm going to do the same to the other end and adhere that. Now we'll be sure that when the card and the weight of the circle of roses won't cause the card base to flop when it's standing up. We want some sturdiness. You could add, if your cardstock's not thick enough, you could add another layer, or what I prefer to do is use 110-pound cardstock, which for my bases, which just makes it sturdy. So that little piece is actually quite an important addition to this card. Right, so now I'm happy with that. Let's go on to creating our roses. One of the things I love to do is to create my own coloured cardstock. We don't all have every colour under the sun in our stash, so I do this often, and I think it's a very easy way of creating the colours that you exactly need. So what I've done is I've got some pre-cut more or less A2 panels of cardstock, or you can use any cardstock that you've got in your scraps drawer. That's a great way of using it. All the Altenew inks come in 4 shades of a certain colour. So I chose a red, a pink, an orange, a yellow, green, turquoise or teal, blue, and a purple colourway. Here I'm showing you what I did when I took the mini ink cube and I rubbed it directly to paper to in the top corner with the lightest colour, and that's where I will die cut the first layer, or the bottom layer of the flower. This particular die set has 4 layers to it, so this is perfect, and I'm simply cutting those out. I'm able to use my mini blossom die cutting machine, which is very handy. It just sits next to me on my desk, and I can cut the first and the second layers from the lightest and the second lightest colours. And then I will go ahead and I will do the same with the third and the fourth layers. The fourth layer is the darkest colour, which is on the right there. You'll see the 2 darker colours. The darkest is at the top, and I will do exactly the same. Run those 2 layers through, gently pull out any landlocked pieces, release it from the negative, and once I've done that, I can then start to adhere each layer together. All Altenew stamp sets and die sets come with layering guides, which I find very useful, just especially when you've got an intricate design. It definitely helps to get your layering pretty much perfect. But you know, if it doesn't have to be 100%, if it's not perfectly lined up, nobody's going to notice, but the layering guides are very helpful with this. Altenew has some new double-sided adhesive, or a tape runner should I say, and I'm going to use that today. Less messy than liquid glue, which I normally use, but they've just restocked these tape runners, so I decided to use that, and I was very happy with the results. You still have the opportunity to wriggle, to move them around if you don't press hard. Once you're happy with your placement, use looking at the bottom left and the top notches there in that design, and that's where I'm layering up, and I'm using the guide to help me. Once you're happy with the placement, you can then press hard with your fingers and make sure that tape has adhered the two layers together. So a less messy option if that's the way you want to go, but liquid glue would be just as fine. This one I'm lining up that little curve there, and then everything else seems to just fall into place. And there we have our third layer. So that rose is becoming quite realistic now. And now onto the final and fourth layer, popping that on top. I have my guide just to the side of me, so I can always check it if I'm not quite sure, but this is a very easy die cut set to line up. And there we have it, our purple rose. And I went ahead and I cut out 7 others, so I have 8. I just felt 8 would be a good size. These roses are approximately 2 inches in diameter. It's about the right size that would fit for this card. So any flower, it could be a layering stamp set, any layered dies, whatever you have in your stash, use that for this. And it doesn't even have to be roses. This design is very versatile. You could make this into anything that your imagination can conjure up, really. I think this would be great for a masculine card if you made it into perhaps a pizza or a dartboard, anything like that that's circular. So think about it. It's all up to your imagination. So for some leaves, the leaf set has 3 layers, which is very easy once again to line up. I did the same direct to paper technique with my inks, 3 ink colors of green, 3 shades should I say, and layering them up using that tape runner. So once I was happy with that, I then decided that this triple leaf was actually too big to use on its own. So don't ever be scared to do a bit of paper surgery, should I say. And I cut all 3 leaves away. You'll see me do that in a moment, so that I had 3 individual smaller leaves to be able to tuck in between the roses. Right, so now you can see I've made 4 lots of rose leaves, and to add some extra shimmer, I'm using my splat box and some Altenew iridescent metallic ink spray, and I'm just spraying a light mist of that so that these roses will have a sparkle. I didn't do that with the leaves, just with the roses. I used my heat gun just to dry them, make sure they were dry so I didn't get any spray where I didn't want it, but the spray actually does dry really quickly. So now comes the fun part, to assemble the roses onto the acetate circle. In order to do this, I need some double-sided foam tape to give some extra dimension, and then I'll also be adhering a sentiment in the middle. So I'm laying out my colors in the rainbow order, and more or less so that I'm going to start with the red, which is at the top, then I'm going to put the green on, just adhering that just at the top, so your rose is halfway onto the acetate and halfway off, and then I'm turning it to make sure that it doesn't catch when the card is standing. So if I need to adjust that, I haven't stuck down the acetate too hard, and I can lift it off and adjust it if I need to. So make sure that every rose that you put on, you just check that it's not sticking out too far. So now I'm putting the left and the right, so I've got 4, and then I'll be able to overlap the other 4 roses, tucking one in and half of it on behind the previous flower and on top of the next, so that they'll all fit in and look like a bunch or a wreath. So we're essentially creating a floral wreath on this card. So the yellow one, and then the teal, and lastly we'll be adding in the purple flower. Of course, you could do all your colors, all your florals the same color. They don't have to be a rainbow, but I love rainbows, so why not make a rainbow? It's just a happy, colorful card. You'll see my hands moving here. This is an edited version of the recording during the actual live class. So I'm just recording a voiceover to explain how I did the card. Otherwise we would have an hour-and-a-half video. So my next step is to add in those leaves. I also will want to cover that brad. We don't want that showing, and the perfect place is a circular sentiment. So here we go with that surgery, paper surgery on those leaves, and I'm going to tuck in the top bigger leaf onto one side of a rose, and then the other 2 smaller leaves to the other side. So there on the left, I'm angling them once again so that they don't stick out too much. Just a little bit of liquid glue this time, attaching them to the back of each rose, and I found that worked really, really well. So I'll repeat that process with the rest of those 4 leaf clusters. And I'm just following a pattern and adding them in exactly like I did with the previous one. So every second rose will have a larger leaf, and then followed by 2 smaller leaves on the next join. and all the time making sure that nothing is sticking below the card base so that it will move. Now you do not have to use a brad, you do not have to make this card spin. I think it's just an extra fun element of the card, making it more interactive. You could certainly leave out the brad option and just use some foam tape in place of the brad to adhere the middle of the acetate circle. So that's another option. You also could do away with the acetate completely if you wanted to make something like another shape, another design, like a pizza, for example. You would have solid cardstock, so you wouldn't have that piece in the middle, that opening or that see-through area in the middle. Now, as you can see on the back, you can see the foam tape, and it doesn't look very pretty. So in order to make it look more, in order to make it look good, I've cut some extra bases, that first layer of the card, and I'm just lining them up on the back and sticking them down with some liquid glue just to make the back look neater. So I'm actually sticking the front of that die cut to the back and joining up the acetate to the top edge of each flower. So once we've finished with that, you'll see that that gives a nice neat finished result. You could of course also cut if you've got some nesting circle dies, you could cut about a 1-inch circular frame and attach that as well if you want to, but that's not essential. For the middle, to cover that middle, I've used the scalloped circle die set from Altenew, and I've used the middle size, and I've die cut that. It has a stitching around it, which just adds a bit of extra interest. I've cut 2 of those. On the front, I've chosen a sentiment, and I've added that I've used some embossing ink, stamped that with the stamp with embossing ink, and then anti-gold embossing powder. I did that before the class, and then I'm adhering that in the middle. This is more an inspiration card, and the sentiments is dare to be different. The original card I made before the class says, "You are not here to be average, you are here to be awesome." And I'm going to put that one in my craft room as inspiration for myself and to give a bit of colour in my room. So we're essentially finished now with the other little piece of the circle. I cut it in half and I've added that bit to the back to cover up the foam tape behind the sentiment circle. And there we have it. It's all done, finished. It moves around freely, and I'm quite happy with the end result. So I hope I've inspired you to try this design. It's really easy to make, and I've seen other people from the class, they made some amazing variations of this idea. So there's some extra photos for you to look at, and I thank you for watching this video. I hope you will consider, if you haven't already, I hope you'll consider to subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell so that you never miss another video that I put out. Until next time, happy crafting.